Have you ever wondered how sharks, the ocean's most mysterious predators, have evolved into such fascinating creatures? These sleek-bodied apex hunters play a vital role in maintaining oceanic ecosystems, showcasing an incredible diversity in behavior and social structures. What can we learn from these ancient beings that have roamed the seas since primordial times? By understanding sharks, we unravel the mysteries of biology and work toward preserving the oceans for future generations. Dive into these 6 captivating stories to explore more. It was the summer of 2012. The sun shone over the Florida Keys and an amber light spilled across the turquoise waters. The small islands, full of multicolor coral reefs and varied fishes, were a great attraction for families aiming at adventures combined with relaxation. The Roberts had joined in and rented an extra-large yacht for the occasion. It would be a festive family reunion with everyone having a lovely time. But just under the surface, it was boiling over. Jack Thompson, the brash 25-year-old with a penchant for recklessness, always felt that his grandmother, Evelyn Roberts, nitpicked about everything. The septuagenarian Evelyn was sharp-tongued and fiercely independent, which earned her respect throughout the years and rendered her somewhat of a target for Jack's youthful arrogance. The years had soured their relationship, filling it with petty arguments and stubborn disagreements. The family had gathered, laughing and chattering on deck as the yacht bobbed gently in the waves. Fishy smells wafted from the tiny galley, but not everyone wanted to celebrate. Jack and Evelyn stood opposite the deck, exchanging heated glances across a room thick with unspoken words. Evelyn had just remarked upon the ludicrousness of Jack's swim trunks while wearing a favorite sun hat, worn everywhere and bejeweled with colorful flowers. Jack, feeling publicly humiliated before his cousins, snapped back a retort about her age and how she should act her age. It hung there, heavy and charged. Her face turned red with anger as Jack felt a surge of defiance. Determined to do so, Jack pushed Evelyn with a mighty shove, but halfway wanted her to stagger a few at least, tumble backward, and regain her position by getting up and back on her feet. Instead, she lost her balance and plunged headlong over the edge of the yacht with flailing arms into the water beneath them. The family gasped collectively and ran to the edge, their expressions filled with horror as they looked on. Little did Jack know then that the bull sharks, a very aggressive species that usually find themselves in more shallow coastal waters, were prowling underneath the yacht. The baiting fish and other marine animals have drawn these sharks into the middle of the area. Evelyn surfaced. She spluttered, shocked, the unmistakable silhouettes of sharks beginning to circle her. Shock turned to panic within the family. Jack's heart raced as he watched the scene, now fully realizing the gravity of what he had just done. Hitherto, he had just crossed the line and his grandmother was in danger now. His cousins shouted instructions at him, pulling life rings and poles from the deck and throwing them toward Evelyn, desperate to rescue her. Evelyn fought to keep her head above water, instinct setting in at the memory of years of swimming lessons and how tough she was. The sharks, however, were attracted by the commotion, a part of fear and guilt mixed in Jack. He couldn't bear seeing his grandmother getting eaten. He dived in head first. The cold water shocked him, and his heart throbbed with adrenaline at the sudden temperature change. Shock led to this cold shaking of water, but he quickly focused on Evelyn, now thrashing about in a panic. Jack swam towards her, pushing aside his fear of the circling sharks. He knew he had to reach her before it was too late. As he reached Evelyn, the shadows of the sharks swelled to engulf them, their dorsal fins slicing the water with a sinister purpose. He shouted for her to go for him, but the call was smothered in the cacophony of splashing water before her. There was a fight for breath within Evelyn, but finally, she saw Jack and reached out. At the same time, he yanked her arm toward him. The water swirled the edges of them. Even as the family watched, horrified, not cheering him on, quiet, not wanting to do anything to influence Jack, they also flung the life rings and poles nearer to the 2 floundering figures in the water. He could feel the moment pressing down on him, but Jack focused on getting Evelyn to safety. He stroked powerfully to pull them both to the nearest life ring. Evelyn seized Jack's arm, her fear palpable. The sharks still circled, sharp, quick movements that spoke of predators. Jack's mind raced as he tried to work out their next moves. At last, they reached the life ring, and Jack wrapped an arm around it, pulling Evelyn to him. He raised his eyes to his family, who were leaning out over the side of the yacht, hope and horror written across their faces. They had managed to maneuver a pole within his reach. With one hand gripping the life ring and the other gripping the pole, he signaled for somebody to do something. Amid the cries, they worked with one accord, pulling Jack and Evelyn toward the yacht side using the pole. The sharks felt the commotion when approaching the side and probably got bored, disappearing off toward the deeper waters. The family finally gave in to relief to pull Evelyn and Jack to the top deck. Breathless and shaken, Jack hauled himself over the side of the yacht with his grandmother. Immediately, water streamed from Evelyn's mouth as she coughed and sputtered. Jack collapsed on his knees beside her in safety, panic and guilt flooding over him. He had never been so scared and regretted anything as much as he did then. Evelyn was still gasping for breath when she turned to Jack in disbelief and anger. The family closed in around them, checking for any injuries, but emotional ones ran more profound than any flesh wound. Jack could see the disappointment in their eyes, and that stung more than any shark bite. As the adrenaline wore off, so did the shock. With her strength returning, Evelyn sat up and glared at Jack. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the low gurgle of the waves against the yacht. Jack knew he deserved her anger. He had just placed his grandmother directly in harm's way, and the realization was unbearable. In the following days, the family tried to recover from what happened. Jack tried to earn everyone back by doing all the chores and listening to Evelyn's stories, which he used to tune out. He realized the ocean can be beautiful and a formidable force, like family bonds. The experience saw them bond closer, both realizing how fragile life was. Jack and Evelyn started understanding each other. They even laughed together about their narrowly missed disaster. Jack did learn that the ocean is mighty and deserves respect. Evelyn softened, and for the first time began to appreciate her grandson, who was working to make amends. As they stood on the deck meeting again for the next time, a few years afterward, laughter rang out across the water. Jack and Evelyn exchanged glances, knowing they had been through so much and had come out stronger for it. The Florida Keys served as a backdrop for adventure and all the encounters, love, forgiveness, and some of life's harsh realities. It was 2008, and Rachel Anderson was on the sunlit beaches of Fiji, ready to dive into the sea. The Mamanuca Islands and their surrounding sea shimmer in turquoise and teem with coral reef life. Rachel's job as a marine biologist had been to study such ecosystems, peer under every rock and crevice of the waves, and find all the secrets buried by the liquid blue. Fiji's rich biodiversity and coral gardens set an ideal scene for her most recent research. That day, Rachel was donning her wetsuit, going over the equipment with a fine-tooth comb before entering the still, transparent water. Her heart raced as she dropped further into the darkness. The sun filtered down from above into the caverns of the coral below. Many multicolored fish accompanied her, while bright corals swayed lightly in the current. This was her paradise. Rachel drifted with the current over the reef, taking detailed notes on the species of coral she passed by, and admiring their ability to resist climate change. However, the corals had her too preoccupied to notice one thing down in the crevices: lots and lots of giant moray eels. The moray eel stood with its long body and toothy smile different from the rest. Usually shy, they became hostile when cornered. As Rachel had been so engrossed, she had reached forward in her studies, jostling the eel's rocky hide slightly. The eel charged out of its lair in a cloud of silt. The adrenaline kicked in, alert to Rachel as though sensing danger. It was over instantly. The serene subaqueous landscape was a scene of turmoil. Swiftly, a rush and the moray eel exploded from its hole, its gaping mouth an inch from Rachel's arm. Lightning fast, more so than she could react, the eel tightly wound its long, thin, serpentine body around her. Panic seized Rachel. She desperately struggled for her freedom, where she had been on a peaceful dive only moments before. Rachel's training as a marine biologist took over. She remembered the actions of the moray eels. They bite when cornered. The fight-or-flight urge surged, but she realized that panic would only worsen her situation. So instead, she began to breathe and tried to remain calm in the face of the mounting tide of fear. Rachel was sure that a long time would pass with her arm trapped before her head could think again. She suddenly remembered the anatomy of eels. Their jaw structures are meant to grasp and hold rather than crush. That meant she could get free if she found some way to loosen its grip. Girding up her loins, she started wiggling about her arm to create space between the skin and the fearsome jaws of the eel. The moray eel sensed her movement, and it tightened its grip. Rachel knew the pressure was increasing, but she would not lose hope. All of a sudden, she remembered the small knife she always carried around her waist. It was for emergency purposes. With a quick twist, Rachel reached for the knife and her fingers touched the handle. It was a risk, but she had to try. Rachel drew her knife and held it toward the eel's body. She didn't want to hurt the creature. She just needed to disorient it as a means of escape. Pressing the blade to the side, she jerked hard, and the eel, taken by surprise, momentarily loosened its grip. Rachel jumped on the chance, yanked her arm free, and swam away from the aperture, her legs kicking and her heart racing. She swam up toward the surface. Once everything was in order, the water seemed like a sea of turbulence. As she ascended, Rachel turned around, half expecting the eel to follow her, but instead she saw it retreat into its rocky den and melt into the shadows of the reef. Relieved but shaken, Rachel broke the surface, gulping for air, the warm sun shining on her face. She floated there for a second, processing her harrowing adventure and the flood of feelings. Up the very instant she could, Rachel began to swim toward the boat, her mind running a mile a minute. She knew that marine life was unpredictable, but this was something entirely different again. One that made her respect the creatures that lived in the sea all the more. It was a potent reminder that danger lay just beneath the surface of beauty. As soon as she reached the boat, Rachel climbed aboard, and the crew members immediately noticed her pale face and wide eyes. They surrounded her, concern etched on their faces while she related her experience. While they had heard of such encounters before, first-hand witnessing it all left them in awe of the ocean's raw power. Rachel took the experience as a turning point in her career. She became an activist for more marine safety training for divers. Further, she emphasized the need to learn more about animal behavior vis-a-vis their response to humans when people are interacting with them in the wild. Her experience made her see marine biology differently, amalgamating her passion for research with education and safety. That nightmarish encounter with the moray eel had become one of the defining chapters of her life, shaping her role into what she functioned as an ocean saver. She was fascinated and respectful of the ocean, with beauty and unpredictability, mindful that underneath danger lies a world worth defending. Summer 2013 was spent in the Bahamas with crystalline waters and immensely colorful marine life. Situated in the Caribbean, this archipelago featured breathtaking coral reefs filled with fish of any color, and the most unusual underwater landscapes. At the age of 35, Mike Anderson was a very enthusiastic snorkeler. He had made his forays into the Bahamas for years. Each trip was a chance to plunge him into the determined sea depth, into the great mystery that fused with him to establish a close relationship with nature. His enthusiasm flickered like fire, and he was all set to have yet another snorkeling experience. In his bright blue jumpsuit, strapping on all his snorkel gear with the sun glinting off the shiny equipment, he felt like a superhero, ready to venture into the wonders beneath the waves. When Mike slipped into the water, he was bombarded by color and life. Schools of fish swam about, glinting in the sunlight and lighting up the coral formations like 1,000 tiny jewels. The sea plants swayed gently in the ocean currents, performing a shimmering dance. He floated, taking deep breaths, allowing the ocean's quiet to sink into his skull. Little did he know that this peaceful adventure would turn dark on him. Mike locked onto a flash of movement far ahead as he drifted along. That intrigued his heart, and he swam faster, excited to see that strange movement being created. He realized it was a big, great barracuda as he got closer. Its slim body was slicing the water with the grace of something almost predatory. Its silver skin pulled the sun's light from above and drew his eye to it, nearly as if he were a moth to that flame. Initially, Mike felt awe regarding the barracuda and its pointed beauty, complete with razor-sharp teeth glinting ominously. But as the barracuda swam closer, Mike's fascination turned to unease. He could feel the creature's eyes on him, the black pupils locked onto the shiny objects of his snorkel gear. The barracuda began to circle him lazily. What seemed slow, deliberate motions caused Mike to believe he was being sized up for the kill. Mike's heart pounded with memories of stories shared by fellow snorkeling buddies that barracudas were attracted to shiny, reflective things that they mistook for food. A surge of panic filled him as he realized his predicament fully. The calm waters he was comfortable with a moment ago were like an ominous death trap closing on him in stealth. He struggled with his nerves, realizing he could easily provoke the fish. Mike began swimming back to his boat with purposeful strokes, which rested a short distance away on the surface. He carefully kept his movements slow and sure, trying not to turn his head with the tension of the barracuda. With tension like that, each flick of his fins seemed magnified as the atmosphere hung thick with water. The big barracuda circled repeatedly, each sweep closer to Mike than the last. Its sharp, razor-edged teeth glinted in the sunlight, and Mike wondered if he had miscalculated the fish's curiosity, or if it was hungry. He quickly focused on the boat, visualizing climbing aboard and escaping the situation. But the constant fear gnawed at his insides. As he swam, Mike's mind was filled with thoughts about the oceanic predators he had always admired from afar. Though he had read many books and seen most of the marine habitats in documentaries on television, nothing came close to experiencing it. Here he was, a trespasser on the barracuda's home ground, with a fair measure of respect for the creature as he quaked with fear. Every stroke was heavier than the preceding one, and consequently the distance that separated him from the boat appeared interminable. Mike increased the frequency of his panting, his heart beating uncontrollably. The barracuda felt behind him, its dark shadow hanging in the deep. He resisted the temptation to look behind him. He knew it only served to increase his anxiety. Almost immediately, the barracuda approached again, closer than before. He felt his instincts surge and kicked harder, thrashing his body through the water with increased emergency. But the fish didn't give in. It shredded the waves with its lean body, coming closer after each pass. Mike's mind raced as he remembered stories of snorkelers who said that a barracuda, marginally mishmash, had confronted them. Finally, he reached the boat's side, where he clung to the ladder with trembling fingers. Not daring to let go, he caught his breath, peering toward the barracuda. Thankfully, it had stopped its pursuit and hung a few feet away, almost as if Mike's sudden rising stupefied it. Mike could see the glint of sharp teeth, but no attack was visible. Maybe it did not care or was waiting for his next attempt. One final heave had him on board and gasping, with adrenaline running at the speed of a racehorse. He fell flat on the deck face down, gasping for breath. The magnitude of the encounter came crashing down on him. The dark shadow of the barracuda circled beneath the boat as an ominous reminder. He was momentarily frightened and awed simultaneously. He had escaped, but not without a new regard for the ocean's predators. He lay on the deck, feeling the sun's warmth seeping into his skin as Mike reflected on what had happened. He had seen how quickly the calm beauty of the ocean could turn into an emergency. He knows the barracuda had responded out of its environment and was driven by instinct, something Mike had to acknowledge. That incident would forever change how he viewed snorkeling and the sea. Days later, returning home to the Bahamas, he once more felt attracted to the waters where he had met the great barracuda. This time, he entered the ocean reverently, thankful for the lessons he had learned. He had learned a deep appreciation for the beauty of the sea and its hidden dangers. Grinning, he floated there in the warm waters of the Bahamas, thanking the journey that had turned him into this snorkeler. In the summer of 2015, Anna Whitaker was found at the shores of the Pacific Ocean, more precisely, of the striking coastline of Monterey, California. Such was the fame of this area with its impressive forests of giant kelp and prolific sea creatures, a natural haven for kayakers and nature lovers. Gentle waves stroked ashore as the salty breeze carried faraway cries of seagulls. Once possessing a rich maritime history, Monterey was abuzz with whalers and fishermen. It has become a home ground for many marine animals, and people visit this place to experience an undersea adventure. Anna was a feisty 32-year-old who never avoided an excellent thrill or challenge. She paddled her trusty kayak, bright yellow and named Sunny, in the emerald green waters, weaving her way with the tide between towering stalks of kelp that danced in an underwater ballet. The sun cast its golden colors across the sea, and Anna felt deeply connected to such loveliness in the ocean, as unaware of the lurking danger beneath the surface as one could get. Anna paddled more profoundly into the kelp forest, reveling in the peacefulness of that moment. She took in the swaying kelp that provided shelter for fish and other sea creatures. It was nearly magical, and she couldn't help but smile around the idea that life was going on unbeknownst to her. Her tranquil paddle was short-lived, though. She was brought back to awareness with an extraordinary feeling. Suddenly, her kayak began tugging to one side, jerking her out of her reverie. First, she thought the currents were playing tricks on her. Then there was the tugging again, pulling her kayak backward with alarming force. She turned to investigate with a racing heart. Much to her surprise, a vast tentacle came out from the depths of the water, wrapping itself around the side of her boat. It was a giant Pacific octopus, its splotched skin glistening shades of blue and brown, mistaking Anna's kayak for some unsuspecting prey. Panic flooded Anna as she realized things were worse than she had thought. By its grip, the octopus was dragging Sunny deeper into the water. She could feel the tips of the kayak slipping precariously, with water slamming against the sides. She thought fast. Such encounters had been shared, but she never thought it would be her case. She clamped down on her paddle, knowing she had to get away. Her paddle swung hugely, connecting with a soft, wet thud to the tentacle that gripped her kayak. But its hold tightened. It was a battle of strength and wits, and Anna knew she had to think fast. The octopus was intelligent. It could solve problems, and Anna needed to outsmart it. She remembered now what he'd said while she kept thumping away at the tentacle. Staying calm was the key. Taking a deep breath, Anna refocused. The kelp was thick in there, and she could use it to her advantage. With renewed adrenaline, she paddled the kayak from the octopus toward a clump of dense kelp. The octopus seemed interested, perhaps slightly puzzled, and momentarily relaxed its hold. Anna took the opportunity to paddle furiously, sending Sunny into the safety of the kelp. The fronds wrapped around her kayak, creating a natural barrier between her and the creature, yet she knew this to be only a reprieve. Unfazed by this, the octopus continued to move through the kelp, its tentacles feeling for her. Anna's heart pounded while water swirled around her. She needed a plan. She remembered how the octopuses were agile and clever, and now considered using that against it. Anna, partially hidden behind a kelp wall in her kayak, knew she needed to make a diversion. She picked up the little waterproof bag containing her lunch and tossed it into the water. The bag splashed and bobbed away, alerting the octopus with its fish snack contents. The two tentacles moved gracefully in the current and shot out toward the bait. This was Anna's chance. She paddled away from her hiding place as quietly as possible. The octopus was now entirely engrossed in its pursuit of the snack and seemed quite blind to her escape. Relieved, yet feeling urgent, Anna started to paddle back toward shore, her muscles straining with each stroke. She paddled away, turned, and saw the octopus twisting and turning in a mesmerizing dance, oblivious to her leaving. Empathy hit her for the poor creature, acting simply upon its instincts. Another surge came over her, triumph. She outsmarted one of the ocean's most cunning predators. Finally, Anna beached Sunny on the soft sand, still gasping. The adrenaline gave way to relief and a new regard for the ocean's other creatures. She'd faced up to a giant octopus and come out the winner, but the battle had changed her. Anna sat in the warm sand, reflecting on her experience. The ocean was indeed an enigma, and she had foreseen that. She thanked the balance of life under the sea and was made fully aware that every creature serves such biodiversity. This encounter, scary as it was, expanded her perspective on the wonders of nature. As she gathered her gear, Anna knew that the battle with a giant octopus had marked her, but it was much more than just excitement. The core of it held a moral, resilience, and respect for nature. She came out of the kayaking adventure as a survivor and storyteller, willing to share wisdom with the rest of the world into the delicate balance of life in the deep blue sea. In the summer of 2011, the sun scorched above the beautiful coastline of Oahu, Hawaii. With its stunning beaches and colorful marine life, this island became a place for most surfers. This ever sound of tides from the Pacific Ocean and the breaking waves on the beach relieved any monotonous eye. It was in a beautiful setting with an undercurrent of danger from different species of sharks within the waters, though, the mighty hammerhead among them. Josh Burnett was a 28-year-old surfer known for riding the most challenging waves. His commitment to the ocean was reflected in the depth of his tan and sun-bleached hair. Waves that day were ideal, clean, forceful, and beckoning. With a gentle breeze shifting through the palm trees lining the beach, it almost felt like the perfect scene for an exciting surfing session. He felt the adrenaline rush as he paddled out. The water was rich in hue, deep aquamarine and luminous with sunbeams. Josh lay on the board waiting for the next big one to lift. The ocean was alive, pulsating with energy, and he relished every moment of being wrapped in its embrace. He couldn't have known that this beautiful day would shortly turn to the chilling. After catching a few sound waves, Josh saw something strange moving below in the depths. Something very sneaky was moving underwater, creating the ripple that had caught his eye. He peered into the water, trying to focus on what it was. First, he dismissed it as some trick of the light or maybe even a school of fish. Then, leaning on his board, he saw a blade fin surface, a fluid glide that moved with ominous intent against the background of a living, pulsing ocean. Josh's heart jumped slightly as he watched the fin shape, tall and wide, tapering into a distinctive hammerhead. A wave of panic surged through him. He had read enough about shark behavior to know that this particular species could be curious but potentially dangerous. The hammerhead began circling him, attracted by the vibrations of his board. A predator interested in looking at the possible prey. Josh instinctively remembered what older, experienced surfers had told him to do when confronted with sharks. He began paddling slowly, deliberately, keeping his movements fluid so as not to startle the creature. His heart raced, yet he focused on the rhythm of his breathing and tried to match it with the gentle roll of the ocean beneath him. He could see what the hammerhead was doing as he paddled his board, circling, studying him with wide eyes to determine whether he was a threat or mealtime. Josh knew that sudden movement might aggravate a shark. He suppressed his panic and focused on returning to shore while trying to lock eyes on the creature. Josh paddled slowly and deliberately, feeling the sun's warmth on his back but acutely aware of the cold reality below him. The hammerhead shark kept circling, and Josh noted its size, more extensive than he had thought before, more than 10 feet long. He recalled the stories of surfers who had had similar encounters, some getting free and others unlucky. With each stroke, Josh's mind raced. He considered his options. He could try to make a break for it or paddle calmly, hoping the creature would get bored. He decided on the latter, following his gut and ocean knowledge. He scanned the horizon with his paddle, searching for other surfers or boats. The beach was usually animated, but now it seemed devoid of life. He saw some surfers down the coast, oblivious to his situation. A surge of frustration flushed over him as he wished he could signal them. But the hammerhead shark stayed close, acutely attuned to any disturbance. Every minute seemed like an hour as he kept backing away cautiously. Though still circling, the hammerhead shark did not press the attack. Much like when riding waves, Josh concentrated on his technique. He paddled precisely, his body tight but controlled. Yet with each stroke closer to safety, that shark remained, much like a harbinger of the ocean's unpredictability. Then, just as the hope was about to fade, the shark suddenly changed direction and swam out of sight into the deep blue water. A surge of relief washed over Josh, but he knew better than to let his guard down. He kept paddling as he watched the water for any signs of the shark returning. The closer he came to the shallows, the more he could see the sandy floor. The water grew warmer, and far away he heard laughter and chatter from the beach. Gathering all his strength, he paddled on, the adrenaline sending him forward. With a final push, he felt his board glide over the sand and clambered off, stumbling into the shallows. Josh bobbed in chest-deep water, blowing and snorting as he surveyed the sea for any sign of the hammerhead. The adrenaline rush was fading, replaced by a sense of joy mixed with disbelief. He had faced down a shark and lived to tell about it. The beach was alive with people now, families, friends, and fellow surfers. None knew what sort of danger he had narrowly squeaked his way past. He walked back to shore with a new respect for the ocean. It was a beautiful beast that commanded respect. Josh reflected on the rush of excitement with the underlying dangers of surfing. This would be part of his story, a lesson in love and respect for humans' relationship with the creatures of the ocean. The story of Josh's terrifying encounter with the hammerhead became legendary among local surfers over the years. Told around the campfires and in the shops, it was a story that warned and inspired simultaneously. Josh Burnett faced his fears and became stronger because of them. A very clear epitome of the invincible spirit found within those who dare to ride the waves. Ultimately, it wasn't that surfing thrill, but respecting the ocean and its creatures, knowing that every wave could bring something remarkable or terrifying. In this understanding, Josh found a deeper connection to his beloved ocean, its beauty and dangers. In the summer of 2010, the sun in the Mediterranean beamed warmly as azure waves kissed softly onto the stern of the small sailboat named the Sea Whisperer. Tom Henderson, a seasoned sailor deep into his late 40s, had been navigating these waters since his early 20s. His heart felt attuned to the rhythms of the sea. Portofino, Italy was born and raised in this coastal town where Tom was based, and it seemed pretty acquainted with the beauty and dangers hidden within the Mediterranean. Portofino, the gorgeous fishing village with colorfully draped houses precipitously seated upon the cliffs above the harbor, made salt and freshwater seafood create beautiful fragrances that hit all the narrow streets. Growing up with stories of daring sailors and treacherous waters, Tom felt a deep connection to this place. This was where he learned to sail, respect the ocean, and heed its warnings. On a sweltering afternoon, Tom decided to stop navigating a bit. The sun was pounding down relentlessly, and the cool blue water attracted him too much to be resisted. He moored his boat close to a faraway nook, whose rocky cliffs made a wall for the wind. With a glance around, he confirmed he was all alone. The seclusion of the cove felt like a private paradise just waiting to be explored. The refreshing coolness overtook him as he slipped into the water, killing the day's business. Tom swam, his strokes muscular and confident. He felt free, forgetting the struggles for a moment in the world against the surface. The sea, however, held secrets that he was blissfully unaware of. Nearby, a gigantic lion's mane jellyfish floated silently beneath the waves. Its almost transparent bell and long trailing tentacles swayed gracefully, an ethereal creature in a world of its own. The jellyfish was a marvel of nature, but it would soon become a nightmare for Tom. Further out in the water, Tom suddenly experienced an odd sensation against one of his legs. His initial reaction was that some piece of seaweed had brushed against him, and then, in the next instant, a sharp sting shot through his body. Confusion turned to horror as he realized he had swum into a jellyfish. The pain was unbearable, and he could feel the tentacles wrap around him like a tightening grip that paralyzed his movements. Tom's heart was beating like a drum. Panic filled his being as he struggled to comprehend the situation. The water, so fresh a moment ago, now seemed more like a prison. He battled the tentacles with a maniac's desire, but the harder he thrashed about, the tighter they held him. Thoughts raced through his mind. What if he could not break free? What if this was the end? Acting on his instincts, Tom forced himself to remain calm. He remembered telling stories he had heard regarding jellyfish stings, which were panic acts to intensify their result. His mind raced through all the techniques he had learned over the years, but which one of them should he do now? He needed to get back to the boat, but how? With the sheer force of his will, Tom started to swim towards the surface, the stabbing bursts of pain in his leg with every kick. He pointed his eyes at the light. It shimmered like a gem in an insane dance above him, the only hopeful thing in the confusing ocean. Every inch seemed like a wrestle, yet he refused to give in. As he came up for air, gasping and choking, Tom glanced at the jellyfish, its tentacles now milling about in the water almost mockingly. He had to make it to the Sea Whisperer. It bobbed away in the distance, although the jellyfish wasn't letting him off that easily. In a final deep-reaching burst of energy, Tom powered into the water, each stroke more complex than the last. Again, the jellyfish tentacles grazed his skin, and a new wave of pain filled him. He bit down on his teeth and willed himself to push through the pain, to overcome the agony, knowing the only goal was to survive. He finally returned to his boat, where he held onto the ladder with trembling hands and pulled himself up. It was as if the jellyfish swam away, having had its moment. The race left Tom collapsing on the deck, heart still careering as he fought hard against the coolness of the surface with each breath. He looked down at his leg, where red welts showed the site of the jellyfish sting. The pain was so intense, but he was relieved at the same time. At least for now, he was safe. Tom quickly drew out his first aid kit and began shaking with fear as he rummaged through its contents. He dabbed vinegar into the site and hoped it would neutralize the venom. The cool liquid soothed, but he was wary. Beautiful as it was, the Mediterranean was untamed water and unpredictable. With these reflections, the sun began to drop, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Tom reconsidered the day's events. He had come face to face with a creature thriving in the sea long before humankind had set sail. That encounter reminded him of the power and capriciousness of the ocean, lessons not easily forgotten. With the pain slowly fading, Tom started the engine of the Sea Whisperer. He had come for a refreshing swim, but it had turned out to be another way of barring his mind from the hidden dangers in nature. He returned to Portofino with a revitalized respect for the water he had loved all his life. He lay in his cabin that night, and the gentle rocking lulled him into his sleep. He found his dreams on an ocean as marvelous, under the sun, living. Tom knew he would sail the sea again, but now, with the knowledge of just how unpredictable it could be. With each wave, he would remember that fateful afternoon. A fight every sailor had to battle at one time with a giant jellyfish. A contest that tested his will and deepened his respect for the ocean.